London's an amazing place for street photography and photography in general. There's a lot of amazing sites, loads of fantastic light, great variety of subjects and locations, and the whole city is very walkable. In this video, I want to share with you my experiences of doing photography here over the last 4 or 5 years, especially during the pandemic when I didn't have the luxury of going elsewhere. And what I want to share with you is just my general tips, advice for when visiting London, specifically tailored towards street photography and photography, but you can also take this advice for general visiting as well. London has everything for everyone. You can honestly jump on the tube and within 10 minutes end up in a completely different area with a different feel and a different mood. If you like graffiti, if you like characters, if you like that sort of grungy urban feel, you can't go wrong with Camden Town, Shoreditch, Brick Lane. Areas like that will provide that in like bucket loads. On the other hand, if you prefer cleaner, simpler compositions, you prefer people dressed in suits and just a very smart type of feel, then you can't go wrong with Canary Wharf, more London, places like that. If you want something a bit more traditional and keep the sort of clean, minimal look, go into Bank, the City, Fleet Street, Temple, you will get that again in bucket loads in those areas. Heading west, you will find Covent Garden, Soho, Chinatown, and that whole West End part of London, which on its own you can probably spend 2 weeks there walking around and still not cover all of it. My favourites are Covent Garden because I just like the markets and the food and stuff, and for photography it's fantastic, loads of really nice light. Chinatown for the characters and for the more, I guess you could say, a bit more gritty street photography feel over there, but you do get a lot of interesting characters and a lot of life happening within Chinatown. Soho is more for nighttime photography because of all the lights and stuff, but generally during the day you'll also get a very nice light and a very nice atmosphere. And then you can head into Piccadilly Circus and further into the west of London, which will just give you a very different feel, a lot more sort of clean, simple type of feel with all the parks and all that sort of stuff. Now, if you prefer longer walks by the river, you can't beat it. You can start at London Eye, walk all the way towards Tower Bridge, cross over, and then go back up to Embankment. If you're feeling really sort of fit, you can walk all the way to Battersea and beyond, depending on how far you want to walk. And the views are amazing, but in the summer especially, it's great. And you can get very nice sunsets and sunrises from that location. And to be honest, everything I've mentioned so far barely even scratches the surface with all the different locations and areas and places to shoot. My point is that when you come here, you will have ample choice of where to go and what to do, and you will definitely not run out of options. London has some of the nicest light, especially during spring and autumn. In the winter, you get fantastic light as well. It just doesn't last as long and the sun sets like 4 o'clock. And during the summer, around midday, it can get very harsh. However, sunsets and sunrises in the summer are very, very nice. During spring, summer and autumn, anywhere from sunrise through to around 11 o'clock, you will get fantastic light. Then from around 3-4 p.m. until sunset is when I will head out. In the winter, I can stay out all day because the light never gets too harsh. In the summer, the south side of the river gets ample light, whereas in the winter, the north side of the river is where you want to be to get the best type of light. As for specific locations, to be honest with you, pretty much everywhere will get good light throughout the year depending on which time of day and which time of year you visit. The best bit of advice I can give you on this is to download an app called Photo Pills, which will give you the exact location of where the sun will rise, will set, and what area the sun will go through, depending on the area and the time of year and time of day. The only thing I'd say about the app is don't over plan. It's very easy to make a day-by-day plan, exactly where you're going to be at what time to get what photo. Sure, have one day where you have a few rough ideas of, okay, I want to be in Greenwich at this time, roughly, or I want to be at South Bank at this time. Don't go and do like a hour-by-hour plan because it's just not going to work. Certainly leave a large portion of your time to just explore and see what you can find, because in my experience, I've always enjoyed the days more when I'll just walk from point A to point B and see what happens. At this point, I would like to thank the sponsor of the video, which is myself. Right now, I have a 40% off sale on all my prints on my website. The code and the link is down below. Now, this is the print sale, or the print run, sorry, from Christmas, so there's not many left. I certainly believe that like 2 or 3 of the prints are already completely sold out, and the others probably about 3 or 4 left in stock. Once they're gone, they're gone. I don't think I'll be printing again, certainly not for the foreseeable future, so this is your chance to grab them. Free worldwide shipping, and because I'm moving house in a week and a half, if you do help me with buying these prints, you will also directly help me by not doing as many car journeys to move all my stuff. But anyway, that's enough of the channel sponsor, and let's carry on with the video. Links all below. Thanks for the support. No, the weather here is not as rubbish as most people think. Okay, sure, if you go to Dubai, chances are you'll have less cloudy days and less rain compared to London. However, on average, I think that the whole rubbish weather thing is definitely overhyped. Summertime is firmly shorts and t-shirt weather. I would say though, maybe an umbrella and a waterproof jacket for the odd day is necessary, and maybe a jumper in case it gets a bit chilly in the evening. Winter time, it can get quite cold, especially by the river and more exposed locations like Canary Wharf. You can certainly feel the wind chill in those places, so a good jacket, hat and gloves are a must. Gloves, I would say, are very important, especially in the winter, because when your hands are frozen and your fingers are frozen and you can't feel anything, trying to use a camera is a complete pain. In terms of autumn and spring, it can get a bit annoying because obviously 1 minute you're hot, next minute you're not hot, depending on where you are and what you're doing. So layering, I would say, is quite important. On overcast days, it can get very boring. A little hack that I do is if it's completely like whitewashed sky and it's just dull, I'll shoot in black and white, because at least I can sort of remove the boring color out of it and focus on compositions. If it's raining, I'll head straight into the West End because of all the lights, or by the river, because in the rain by the river, you will have like a really nice sort of hazy effect on all the buildings and the skyscrapers, and it does look very nice, especially with people with umbrellas walking past, stuff like that. Now, we do get fog. Typically, it's around autumn, winter time. Very unpredictable. The weather reports for fog here are very sort of hit and miss. It does linger by the river the most, and generally speaking, if you look out the window and it's foggy, just head straight in and hope for the best. But when we do get fog, it is really cool. Also, sunny days are definitely more frequent than you'd think, and they are just simply the best. And finally, if there is one tip I can give you, and that is to stay till the bitter end. If you're out taking photos and you're committed, just stay until the sun has set. And the reason for that is because so many times, in my experience, it will be boring, dull, and then just before the sun sets, the clouds will open up, you'll get amazing light, a fantastic sunset, and you'll just end up kicking yourself for not staying till the end. So stay till the bitter end, commit to it, and yeah, sometimes it will not work out, but when it will work out, you will have some fantastic pictures, and you'll be so glad you did stay behind. Maybe it's because I've lived here most of my life, or maybe because I've been shooting London pretty much exclusively for the last year during the pandemic, but in my experience I have found London to be more difficult for photography compared to other cities like New York. Now, when I say more difficult, what I mean by that is you have to work a lot more for your compositions and for your images. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of roadworks, there's a lot of building, there's just so much going on that trying to simplify and find compositions can be tricky. Of course, some places are generally easier to shoot than others. However, overall, I have found that I really need to pay attention whenever I'm out shooting, and just try to always see if there is an available photo wherever I am, versus being somewhere in New York when I was there like a year ago, when you can literally walk from point A to point B and just bump into amazing scenery and amazing compositions. Again, this is probably biased because I'm just used to this, and if you've never been to London, you can just come here and you're like, oh my god, there's photos everywhere. It's just my experience. I personally find the City, Bank, Canary Wharf, more London, and anywhere by the river the easiest for photography, at least for my style, and then places like Shoreditch, Soho, Chinatown are a bit more difficult because there's a lot more going on, and there's a lot more work involved in getting a good photo. The good thing is, because, as I've said, London's so varied and so diverse, if you are struggling in a particular area, jump on the tube, 5 minutes later you're somewhere completely different, and that could potentially be what helps you to sort of get out of that rut of not being able to see photos and take photos that work for you and for your style. My biggest tip when it comes to gear is keep it as light and as small as possible. There's nothing worse than having to walk around with a ton of heavy lenses, bodies, camera bags weighing you down and getting on your nerves. As for lenses, I would say that a 24-70 will cover 90% of London. There are a few shots and a few locations, so to speak, where a 70-200 will give you some really cool results. However, I wouldn't say it's essential. Certainly if you're coming here for like 3-4 days and you want to stay more in the centre of London rather than going to various viewpoints, then the 24-70 will be more than enough. In terms of what I use, I would say about 80% of my photos are taken on a 24-70 or a Fujifilm equivalent, and then as for primes, I have the 35, the 50 and a 70mm, and only about 5% of my images were taken on a 70-200. So yeah, it's not essential. I would say bring a 24-70 zoom to cover everything, and maybe like a 35mm prime, which will be a small light walkabout lens. Generally, the attitude to photographers in London is overall very good. The only thing to keep in mind, which catches a lot of people off guard, is that a lot of the public areas that you'd think are public in London are actually privately owned. Specifically, Covent Garden, St Paul's, or the area around St Paul's, like the Churchyard, Canary Wharf, More London, they're all privately owned sort of estates, and the easiest way to tell that is if there's security walking around, or if they have signs say don't chain your bikes to this railing, things like that. Now, the reason that can be not problematic, but you might get hassled, is because if you're walking around with like pro looking cameras, the security will come up to you and they will ask you what you're doing, why you're doing it, etc. They all say it's to do with security, but the reality is they will very quickly ask you if you're making money from photography, if you're on social media, blah blah blah. Basically, all they care about is if you're gonna make even a cent or a penny from a photo, they want you to buy a permit so that they make a bit of that. The best way to get rid of them is to say you're a tourist, you're doing it as a hobby, and that's it. They don't have a leg to stand on. Now, if they are being difficult about it, or if they're saying, oh, don't take pictures of this building or do this, best advice is just leave it. It's not worth the argument or the hassle. The one thing to keep in mind is that they are not police. They're just privately employed people like me or you in a normal job. So they can't take your memory cards. They can't force you to delete pictures. And you don't have to explain yourself to them. You don't have to show them anything. If they're being awkward, just walk away, and that's the best thing you can do. However, saying that, in the sort of years that I've been shooting in London, I have never had a really bad experience. Normally, I say it's a hobby and they just walk away. In terms of general members of the public, again, I have never had any real issues. I think people are more than aware now that photography is a huge hobby for millions of people, and generally, as long as you're not pointing cameras in people's faces, like directly, you should be okay. Now, yeah, sure, other parts of the world, especially in Asia, etc., are more welcoming to photography than in London, but again, you will not have any issues. As long as you're not acting like some complete strange weirdo, or you're doing something disrespectful, or something rude, or something that you wouldn't want someone else to do to you when it comes to photography, you will be absolutely fine. And at the end of the day, if you see someone sitting down with a coffee and you want a really nice picture of them because they have a nice hat or a nice coat or whatever, literally go up, politely ask, and you'll be surprised with the answer. By far the best way to get around is walking. London is an incredibly walkable city. It's so easy to walk from one end of town to the other, and you will never really come across a big motorway or a lake or something you have to swim across or anything like that. It generally is just very, very walkable, and to be honest, on a nice summer's day, you can easily clock 20 miles a day just walking about without even noticing it. Now, if you do want to get about very quickly, the tube is the quickest way to get around, and the network itself is just very good. You can get to any part of London very quickly. However, in my experience, the best way to see London is by boat. So I think Thames Clippers they're called, but basically it's not that expensive, and the boats run from one extreme of the Thames to the other. They even go through the Thames barrier, so that's a good way to see the Thames barrier by just going through it. Also, the boats will stop at all the major London areas like Greenwich, London Bridge, Battersea, all of these places. And yeah, on a nice summer's day, you can sit at the back of the boat that's open with a camera with a 24-70 and a beer or a coffee, and yeah, great way to spend the day and a great way to commute as well. In terms of buses, I don't bother with them because I find that they just get stuck in traffic and it takes ages to get somewhere. And cycling, I don't cycle in London because I don't think it's that safe at the moment. So yeah, get about by foot or by boat. Overall, I have never had any safety related issues. However, the nature of living in a big city is that you will unfortunately share the space with knobheads. However, a degree of common sense will protect you whenever you're out taking photos. So a few little things to keep in mind are, if you have big flashy cameras, don't flash them about in public. The only two people that care about your Sony a7S III is you and the person that wants to steal it. So just, use common sense and keep it hidden unless you're specifically taking photos. If your camera has big brand names all over it, then maybe tape them up with some black tape, because in most cases thieves tend to go for brands that they can recognize. Now, if you're walking around, don't have a huge, well-known camera bag on you with a tripod sticking out of it. It doesn't look cool anyway, and you just look like a walking target. Finally, have some insurance for your gear, and if you're out shooting late at night in an area you're not familiar with, then maybe just get an Uber rather than using public transport or walking. And finally, just basic common sense, basic street knowledge. If you're walking around, if something doesn't feel right, if something doesn't look right, put your camera away, turn in the other direction, and walk away. Honestly, I would say anywhere from April through to Christmas, you can come anytime. You'll have a fantastic stay and get some fantastic images. January through to March, it's a bit dead here, so unless you got like a really cheap flight and hotel deals, I personally would wait till later in the year. So to summarize, London's a fantastic city for street photography, architecture stuff, portraits, and just general kind of travel photography, if you like. There is a huge amount of variety to suit different tastes and different approaches to photography. The best way to get about is by walking or by jumping on the boat. There are ample toilets, coffee shops, markets, restaurants, you name it, so you will never feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, and you will always have somewhere to stop and have a bit of a break. And overall, it is a very safe city as long as you approach it with a degree of common sense. People are generally very friendly for such a large city, so as long as you're nice and respectful, people on average will be the same to you in return. I would suggest visiting for a minimum of a long weekend, 3-4 days. However, if you can do a week, that's even better because it'll just be a little bit less rushed. And finally, keep an eye out for one-off exhibitions, one-off events, and random art related things that happen across London, because that can get you fantastic photos which, to be honest with you, you might not be able to ever get, or anyone else will ever get in the future if they are one-off events. And generally, that is basically it. Now, I know this video has been very high level and very general, but that's the whole point. I wanted to give you guys like an overall high level overview of my thoughts on photography in London right now. And further on into the summer, I'll be making a lot more detailed videos on specific areas, specific types of photography in London, and just giving you a lot more, let's say, travel/photography advice for when you do come to visit London. So if you want to watch those videos, please do consider subscribing so you don't miss them out in the future. That's it. I think I've covered everything. If you do have questions, please write them down below. I'll be looking forward to reading your comments. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, press the like button somewhere down there. I hope you have a fantastic day. And yeah, thanks again. Have a good one and see you soon. Bye.
out!